Yeah, it's good to be able to be up here and preach again. I used to preach, like, not real often, but from time to time when we lived in the States and then moved overseas and just haven't really done it much until like the last year. And Pastor Homer's asked me to preach a couple times, so I'm thankful to be able to do it. And I remember the first time I ever preached, I was like 21, I think. I was getting licensed at a church, and I did my sermon on Jonah. And I thought I'd done just a really knockout job on it. And this lady comes up to me after the sermon. She says, Mike, I want to tell you, that was a really good sermon. I thought you did a good job. But I want to tell you that you said the phrase, 47 times throughout the sermon. So I learned something, and I don't say that anymore. Thank you. All right, we're in a one-year series or thereabouts on the book of Luke, and it's called That You May Know the Truth. And as we've learned, there was a man named Theophilus, we can call him Theo for short, and he had some questions. He wanted to find out if what he had learned was really true. Is what Jesus had said, is that really true? Are the events that occurred in Jesus' life, are those things really true? And how do I know for certain? Because at this time, there were not any books that were in circulation. The Bible hadn't been put together. The Gospels really hadn't been written except for maybe Mark at that time. And so Theo knew that Luke was a smart guy, and so he commissioned Luke. He said, hey, would you do me a favor? Would you go around and would you go and do a lot of research and find out for me if what I've actually been told, if what all these other Christians are saying are really true? And so Luke took it upon himself to go do that. And so I don't know how many years he spent researching, but he went out and he interviewed people, he talked to people, he learned about some of the events of Christ, and he wrote them down and he verified what had been said. There's a good chance that he used Mark as an outline because a lot of what's written in Mark is also written in Luke, and Mark is much shorter than Luke, and Luke adds a lot more depth and a lot more information to the life of Christ and what happened than Mark actually did. And so Luke went out and he found out all these things. There's some things that are in Luke that aren't in other books, like Mary's song that we talked about a couple of months ago. And so he finished writing his research paper, his research book, I guess, and he combined it all into one book that we now have as the Gospel of Luke. But in the very beginning, he writes to Theo and he says, I've done this so that you may know the certainty of the things about which you've been instructed. And so we have covered since December till about now the certainty of quite a few things. I don't want to go through all of them, but some of them are the events surrounding Jesus' birth. Pastor Homer preached on that. I preached on Mary's song. We preached on the birth of Christ. Alex came and he preached on some of the events that happened in Christ's life when he was a teenager, whenever he got left behind at the temple. We've talked about forgiveness. We've talked about how Jesus heals. We've talked about the calling of the disciples, and last week Uva came and he preached on the Beatitudes, blessed are you who, so-and-so, and then he also talked about the woes as well. And so we've covered all of these things up to this point, and through it all, we're looking at not only just the certainty of it all, but how it actually applies to each of us, and how it informs and how it corrects our behaviors. And for example, and this is a long time ago, and I was somewhat young and immature, my wife slightly scared me. So I thought it'd be a really good idea if I hid behind a shower curtain and jumped out at her at the most unannounced time and scared her half to death. And I want to tell you, that is not a good thing to do ever to anybody, not to your spouse or friend, because, months of counseling and whatnot. So and was that a real good way to deal with that situation? No, it probably wasn't. And does the Bible have something to say about retribution and getting back at somebody for something that they've done? Well, yes, it actually does. Now, when I was a kid growing up in Dallas, we never went to Chinese restaurants. And so my parents, when I was around 10 or so, decided to take us to a Chinese restaurant called Kathy's Wok. And I'm not real sure what was Chinese about the name Kathy, but I know that Wok had something Chinese in that. And so they took us there to that restaurant, and it's me and my two younger sisters and my brother. And they said, we're gonna have a nice cultural experience tonight. Let's all eat this great Chinese food. And my sisters and brother and I, we complained the whole time. And my parents came out of that restaurant just so frustrated with all of us. And they said, tell you what, we're going to make you a deal. If we never have to take you to a Chinese restaurant, or if we never take you to a Chinese restaurant, then we will never have to take you to McDonald's. And we said, deal. Done deal. We don't ever want to eat Chinese food, so it was a win-win situation for my parents. No McDonald's for them, no Chinese food for us, and that was a good thing. And so fast forward several years later, when my wife and I are out on a date, and I had not been to a Chinese restaurant until that time 10 or 12 years earlier before, so I didn't really know much about what goes on in those things. And so we're standing in the sushi line, and I look over, and to this day, I secretly believe that my wife was I believe that she was secretly getting back at me for what happened with the shower curtain incident, because I asked her, I said, "Dear, what is this green stuff next to the sushi?" And she said, "You don't know? Well, Mike, that's guacamole." Sounded good to me. She said, "Get a lot of it and put it all over your sushi. You will love it." And I did, and I survived, barely. To tell you today that guacamole and wasabi are not the same thing at all. Now, those are silly examples, but the truth is that all of us have a propensity to get back at someone. And what does Luke have to say about that? What does Jesus have to say about that? What does the Bible have to say about that? Chances are you've heard of this more modern-day version of this. It's called online shaming. And maybe you've been a part of it or you've been a victim of it. But it's when people do it to get revenge of somebody online in front of everybody. Because once something goes on the internet, it never goes away. It's always there. And so people will write on somebody's Facebook post, "I hate you because you did this." Or somebody will post an article about something horrible that somebody did. I don't know if y'all remember what happened last year. I think it was Cecil the lion, but some guy shot the wrong lion in Africa, and there's a big brouhaha about that. And there are all these articles and all these tweets and everything going around saying that guy shouldn't have done it, and he was totally shamed on the internet for everybody to see. And so hopefully you've never been a part of that, or hopefully that's never been done to you. But it's a modern way that we have of getting back at people that we don't like, of somebody who's hurt us. And so this morning I read of just this brand new thing, and hope nobody really tries to do this, but there's a company called entrepreneur.com, and they reported that last month the surprising success of what they call Ship Your Enemies Glitter, in which for about $10, the startup sends an envelope full of glitter that, when opened, scatters and irritates the person that it's been sent to. And I know if you're a mom, you totally get that, all right? Because you know how long glitter stays around. I mean, there's a Christmas craft that we did about 5 years ago, and we're still cleaning up glitter from that. So you know just how frustrating glitter can be. But that's a bad thing. And so then it writes on, the business quickly petered out, and it was seemingly worthless until a prescient businessman offered a US $85,000 for its assets. And one of those assets was a valuable list of customers who might buy similar pranks, such as a cupcake that's really horse manure. I mean, who does that? But people do it. I mean, somebody's making some money off of it. But the question is, why do we do this? I mean, all of us have a propensity to get back at the person that we don't like. And it starts from birth. I mean, you watch a toddler take a toy from their older brother and sister. What do? They're going to hit them. It comes naturally. I didn't have to teach my kids that. They just do it. And so inside all of us, there's a desire to make things right. There's a desire for justice. But unfortunately, that justice has been twisted a little bit by sin. And so instead of doing it God's way, we take it on our own to exact justice in the world. And we think, it's payback time. I'm going to get back at you. I'll show you what it means to hurt me. And I'm going to get back at you by hurting you. And we do it all the time. And I find myself doing it all the time as well. Like when I'm cut off in traffic, that just makes me mad for some reason. When I'm in the middle lane and somebody in the left-hand lane decides to turn right across all the lanes of traffic, and I almost plow into them. So what I do, I honk my horn, I flash my lights, or somebody just cuts me off a little bit, and I kind of go a little faster just to get right up on their bumper, to make them a little bit nervous. And there's all those things that I do. One time my wife asked me, she's like, "Why do you do that?" It's like, I don't know. It feels kind of good, and I think it's my calling in the world to help people learn how to drive all over. And so it's natural. It comes so easy to me and to many of us as well. But there's so many moments in our lives when maybe you're passed up for a promotion, and that person who's less talented than you and doesn't work as hard as you, they got the promotion, and so you're upset at your boss or whoever it was that promoted them. You want to get back at them. There's those hurtful words from a friend. that cut deep, and they still hurt you to this day. And how do you deal with that? What do you say to them? Or maybe you've had an unfaithful spouse or a boyfriend or girlfriend, or you're in an abusive relationship, and there's all this pain and there's anger there. And how do you confront that person? How do you deal with that person? Cutting words from a teenage son or daughter, like, man, when my kids say something to me that I don't like, that there's just something that just wells up in me. And I'm like, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to show you that you're not going to say those words to me. Just the family member that's hurt you. And I could stand up here, I could take a mic and a mic stand and have everybody come up here and say, share with us your story. Share with us how you've been hurt by somebody. Share with us about your enemies. Share with us those words that somebody said to you. And you could tell that story and probably make us all cry. And then you could say, and you know what? After that happened, here's what I did to that person. I went and I glued their locks, or I slashed their tires, or whatever it may have been. And we'd all be like, yeah, I probably would have done that as well. That makes really good sense. And holidays and family gatherings, they can be the worst sometimes. I mean, there's that family member that just drives you up the wall, that just says those off-color jokes or something, and you think, if only I can find the right words to say just to kind of get back at them. And it's nice living overseas, honestly, I mean, for most of us, because if you live overseas, there's a lot of family members that you don't have to see for every couple of years, and so you've got this break there. But you know that you've got to go back and see them at some point, sometime. You're going to just have to deal with that. But for most of us, problems don't go away. People that irritate us don't go away. They're being born every day. People are going to just grow up, and they're going to irritate you for the rest of your life. So what do we do about that? I mean, how do we deal with that? I mean, can we always go around cutting off people in traffic? Can we always go around trying to think of a real sarcastic phrase to say back at them? Is there just something that we can do to change the tempo, to change how we do things? And if you're a Christian, it's even harder, because there's the guilt factor that comes in there as well. It's like, okay, God, I shouldn't have cut that person off in traffic, but he really deserved it, and I know I shouldn't do that. And I know that's probably not what Jesus would do if he were driving a car, but I mean, so there's a tension there that we all have if you're a Christian, that, okay, how do I deal with this? Because I know that if I deal with it in the way that I want to, that's not going to be the right way. But if I deal with it the way that Jesus wants to, it doesn't maybe not always feel as good, or just how do I deal with this, and how do I mitigate the situation? But the deal is, the problems are always going to be there. There's always going to be something that's going to happen. We've got to find out the right way. So something that we all need to know about you and about me, there are two things. One is that hurt people hurt people. All right? I don't know if y'all have heard that before, but hurt people hurt people. In other words, you hurt me, I'm going to hurt you back. You hurt me again, I'm going to hurt you back. And the cycle goes over and over and over. And we all know those people as well who are just caustic, you know? I mean, I said you know. They're caustic. And they've always got something negative to say, something bad to say. And you look at that person and you wonder, what is wrong with that person? Why do they always treat me that way? Why do they always treat other people that way? Why are they just so negative and down all the time? More than likely, it's because they've been hurt, and they've been hurt bad. And maybe there's just a string of events in their lives that have just brought them down to this low point. And so they just hurt people, because hurt people hurt people. Number two thing that we need to know about you and me, and that is, go to the next slide, no one can ever pay you back. All right? No one can ever pay you back. If somebody hurts you, they do something wrong, they do something terrible, it doesn't matter what they do to try to change it, they can never pay you back. Because we always think like, boy, that person hurt me and I'm going to hurt them. I'm going to show them. It's payback time. And I want to exact some kind of payment. I want them to repay me in some way because they have hurt me so bad. Well, but the truth is they never can do that, because that moment is already gone. Those words have already been said. Whatever it was that they did to you, it's in the past, and there's nothing that you can do to go back and change that. So how do you deal with that? And I've seen some beautiful instances where somebody comes up to somebody to right a situation, and they say, I'm sorry, we practice this in my family. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I hurt you. What can I do to make it up to you? And will you forgive me? But those instances are rare. Those don't happen very often. And so how do we deal with it when day after day after day you've got to deal with that caustic person in your life? Day after day after day, you've got to deal with the people who cut you off in traffic. Day after day after day, you have to deal with enemies or the people that are in your life that just make life so difficult because you know they're never going to say sorry, and you know there's no way that they can ever pay you back. There's nothing that you can really do to them to really make the situation because it just goes round and round and round. There's always that tension there. So what do you do? And I'm glad you asked. Because I want you to know that this is not a new problem. This is something that goes back all the way to the beginning of time. In fact, your parents and your grandparents and their grandparents, all the way back to the beginning of time, have always dealt with this problem because there's always enemies in the world. There's always people who don't like you. And there's always situations that we are going to have to face. And it's gone on from the beginning of time. And one of the earliest examples is with Cain and Abel. And Cain was very upset with his brother Abel because Abel had a sacrifice that God liked, and God didn't like Cain's sacrifice. And so what did Cain do? He killed Abel, killed him out in a field. And that was the first instance that we know. Now, is that a good way to take care of your brother, your enemy? No, it's not, but it happens, and it happens going all the way up until today. So we're going to take a look at Luke, because Jesus has something to say, very relevant to us today. And so we're going to look at Luke chapter 6, verses 27 through 36. So if you have your Bibles, you can open them, or you can turn them on your smartphone or your iPad or something like that, or you can look up at the screen as we go through it. But before we get to that specific passage, I need to jump back about 2 weeks from 2 sermons ago, and then I'll go through last sermons a little bit. And so if you sit there going, where is Mike going with this thing? I promise you I'm getting somewhere, but I've got to go through there to set up what we're going to look at today. So imagine with me, Jesus is on the mountain. He's been praying all night long. God, who do you want to be my disciples? So he's been up all night. He comes down the mountain, and there are a lot of his disciples, and he says, okay, there's only 12 of you that I can pick, and so I'm going to take you, and you. And he picks his 12 disciples. And then from there, they continue to go down the mountain as well, out to probably a valley or a plain. We're not exactly sure. But when he gets there are people from all over. There's a huge mass of people. And they've come from the north, they've come from the south, they've come from the east, they've come from the west. They've come from all over to come and see Jesus and to hear him. And why have they come? It's because they're sick. These are sick people. This is not like just your general crowd. Luke describes it in very detail. These people have diseases. They have mental issues. They're demon-possessed. They're schizophrenic. They're bipolar. They're whatever you can imagine. These people have these issues. So it's not your normal crowd. Not only that, this crowd has been shunned by everybody else. These are not the people that you bring out into society. You don't bring the lepers into society. You don't bring people with diseases into society. You don't bring just your demon-possessed out into the normal mill of the things. You keep them hidden and you keep them locked away. And so this is not just your normal crowd. They're also poor. This is a poor group of people. They're an oppressed group of people as well because of their issues that they've got going on. So this is the kind of crowd that Jesus is speaking to when he starts talking. And so Luke says that he starts healing people and power goes out from his body, and then suddenly power's gone out of his body, and everybody was healed. The whole crowd was healed. Whatever their diseases were, their mental problems, demon possessions, whatever it was, it's all gone. Jesus is taking care of it. Now, if somebody heals you, you going to listen to that person? Probably. They probably got something good for you, good to say. So Jesus starts on this little sermon, and here's what he said. If you go to the next slide, he says, I want to tell you folks something, because I know that you're poor, I know you're hurting, I know you're sad, I know that you've got all these issues, but let me tell you something. Blessed are you who are poor, because yours is the kingdom of heaven. What? I'm blessed? Really? I'm blessed like I'm poor, but you're telling me that the kingdom of heaven is mine? He's like, yeah, blessed are you who are poor, because yours is the kingdom of heaven. Oh, and get this. Are you hungry? You guys are hungry, right? Because if you're poor, you're probably hungry. Well, blessed are you who are hungry, because someday you're going to be full. Wow, we never heard anybody tell us that. Like, you're going to feed us. You'll get taken care of someday. Oh, and by the way, I know you're all sad because you've been oppressed. You've had the Romans come through here. They've oppressed you. I'm sure there's some sad stories about that. You've had the Sadducees and the Pharisees. You know what they tell you? They say, hey, the reason you're like this, the reason that you're sick, the reason you've got mental problems, the reason that you're demon-possessed, and the reason that you're not like us, the righteous people, is because there's sin in your lives. You know, if you can get rid of that sin, you could be like us. And so Jesus says, I know that you've been oppressed by people all your life. I know you've got it hard. I know you're sad. But get this, blessed are you who are weeping and who are sad, because someday you're going to laugh. I mean, can you imagine, like, what an encouraging statement that is to that crowd? And then he says, blessed are you who are hated, because they've been hated. They're the dregs of society. Nobody likes them. That's why they're put away. But he said, blessed are you who are hated on account of me, for your reward in heaven will be great. And this crowd is probably going like, wow, Jesus gets us. Like, we've never had anybody who's ever come to us and said words like this to us. Like, wow, we're blessed. I mean, those Sadducees and those Pharisees, they tell us that we're wretched and that our problem is a sin issue and that we're never going to get out of this because of that. And the Romans have come through and they've mistreated us, and the tax collectors have come through and they've taken everything from us, and so we are oppressed and we're poor. But Jesus gets us. Man, Jesus, what else do you have to say to us? So he flips it a little bit. And so now he moves away from them and he flips it onto the oppressors. And so he says, woe to you who are rich, because someday you're going to be poor, or you've already got what you got. And can you imagine what that would sound like to a crowd full of just poor, oppressed people? Like, yeah, Jesus, preach it, man, preach it. Get on those rich people, because they've oppressed us. Yeah, what else do you have to say? And Jesus says, well, woe to you who are full, who've had enough to eat, because someday you're going to be hungry. And they're all going, yeah, Jesus. Tell them, show them what it's like to be like one of us. Show them what it's like for them to be hungry, because we're hungry all the time, but they always get what they want. And we want to change things. We want to see those rich people be flipped down here to where we're at. We like to see them poor. We like to see them sad. We like to see them hungry. And Jesus says, and woe to you who are laughing, because someday you're going to weep. It's going to be sorrowful for you. And they're like, yeah, Jesus, come on, go on. And so Jesus says, woe to you who are liked by everyone, because someday that's not always going to be the case. And so these people are just enamored with Jesus. He has them wrapped around their finger, because this is a poor, poor crowd. And all of a sudden, Jesus tells them that they are a blessed people, that good things are going to come to them. And then he gets on all the people who've oppressed them. And it's starting to sound like revolutionary talk, and like something's going to happen here, because Jesus is going to change everything for them. And so he's got them wrapped around his finger. And then all of a sudden, like a counterpunch, he knocks them off guard a little bit. And he goes on, and he says, now listen to me, and here's what I'm telling you. He says, but I say to you who hear, love your enemies. Love your enemies. Well, hold on, Jesus. Wait a second. Like, we were just talking here about how things are going to be switched around, and how those who have oppressed us are going to become oppressed, and how we're going to rise up. He said, no, that's not what I was saying at all. Those things will happen in the future, but I'm not guaranteeing that for now. But he said, in the meantime, while you're still oppressed, love your enemies. But Jesus, I don't know that's a very, no, I'm telling you, love your enemies. Oh, and not only that, go on, he says, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, and pray for those who abuse you. Do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, and pray for those who abuse you. You might be thinking, okay, Jesus, like, I know you're God. I know you're Jesus. And I mean, that's good. That's all nice for you. But you probably haven't met my mother-in-law. There's a couple people that you haven't met. And Jesus said, no, I understand. I got it. But what I'm saying is that these people aren't going to go away. Your situation is not always going to change. It may not always get better. So I'm giving you a different plan. Love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, and pray for those who abuse you. Now, remember what I said earlier, is that hurt people, right? And we never get paid back for the wrongs that have been done to us. So what Jesus is saying is that the way that you've always done things is not going to work. There's got to be a different way for you to take care of the problem. There's got to be a different way for you to deal with the people in your life, because what you want to do is not working. The drivers here and around the world are not getting any better because I honk at them or flash my light. There's always those people. So that's not getting any better. And the issues in your life with the person or with the enemy or person at work or school or wherever it is that you may be is not going to get any better if you handle it the same way. So what I'm telling you is that if you want to change things, if you want to make it better for you, it may not necessarily be easier, but it's better, then I'm telling you, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, and pray for those who abuse you. And notice this too, that Jesus is not denying the fact that we have enemies. I mean, we all have enemies. We all have people who don't like us. And Jesus, when he was there as well, he had enemies too. So he's not denying that. He's actually saying, I recognize that. I get you. I understand that you've got enemies. So what are you going to do about that? And then go on to the next slide. Here's what else he says. He keeps going. He says, and to the one who strikes you on the cheek, slap him back. That's not what he said. Just make sure you're paying attention. He said, the one who strikes you on the cheek, offer the other cheek also. And from one who takes away your cloak or your jacket, we don't really wear cloaks, I don't think. I don't. And don't withhold your tunic either. I don't have a tunic either, but I have other jackets. So, and then he says, give to everyone who begs from you, and from one who takes away your goods, do not demand them back. And as you wish that others would do to you, do so to them. See, Jesus is offering us a different way. Instead of us saying, I'm going to pay you back, I'll show you, I'm going to get you, you're going to get what you deserve, and it's coming for you. Jesus is saying, no. You can't do it that way because that's the way that everybody does it, and it's not changing anything. In fact, I'm giving you a way to deal with your oppressors. I'm giving you a way to take charge and to take control of what's going on, and you may still be oppressed, but here's the deal. When somebody slaps you on the cheek, you can say, fine, you can slap me on this cheek, but you know what? You can take that from me, but I'm going to give this to you because I've got control. Not only that, if they take your coat from you, they haven't taken everything from you, but you can take control of that situation, and you say, fine, you can take that, but you know what? I'm going to choose to give you something of mine. I'm going to change this up a little bit. And what that does, it takes the fun, if you want to call it fun, out of oppressing. It takes the fun out of stealing. It takes the fun out of abusing somebody. When somebody throws a curse at you or says rude words to you, and you say, God bless you, or something like that, just takes the fun, just sucks all the air out of it. And so Jesus is showing us a different way, because when we come back with a sarcastic comment or with some snide remarks back to them, what does it do? It escalates the tension over and over again. And not only that, when we respond like the way that they want us to respond, it shows them that they still have control. In other words, your oppressors still oppress you. When it's always going on in your mind, how can I get back at that person? What can I do? What can I say to them? It means that they still have control over you. They still oppress you. And that's not a situation that any of us ever want to be in. But when that person just drives you crazy, and you want to drive them crazy as well, and you want to show them, they still got control because they're getting the response that they wanted to get from you anyways. So how do you change the response? You love them. You do good to them, you bless them, and you pray with them. And so one thing that we can learn from this right here on the next slide is that we've got to deal with our enemies on God's terms. Deal with your enemies on God's terms, not on your terms, because our terms aren't going to work. It's been proven over and over that our terms are not going to work, but when we deal with our enemy on God's terms, things might happen, things might change. Now, just when you think that Jesus is done talking, he gives an excellent argument as to why this is going to work. And so he says, this is what Luke records, and Jesus says, he's telling this crowd of poor people, and he's talking to us today as well, here in 2016. He says, if you love those who love you, what benefit is that to you? I mean, really, what benefit? Because for even sinners love those who love them. What Jesus is saying is like, if we all in this room, if we all love each other because we're Christians and God's commanded us to do, and we're supposed to do that, but he said, but if you only do that, like, it's not going to make any difference in the world. Why? Because even sinners, even pagans do the same thing to each other. Even Hitler loved his people. I mean, he did good things for the people and those that were close around him. So if we love those who are close to us, and Hitler did the same thing, I mean, Jesus is saying, you're not doing anything different than what Hitler did. And he says, if you do good to those who do good to you, what benefit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. The most evil, vile person is going to do good to people who are good to them. It's a nice little payback system. And Jesus is saying, if you do it that way, if you're only going to be good and nice to the people who are around you, who like you, you're not doing it any differently than the rest of the world. And then he goes on to say, if you lend to those from whom you expect to receive, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners to get back the same amount. In other words, nothing is going to change. There's got to be a different way of doing this. Because we can look back in history and see examples over and over and over of people who hated their enemies and who did horrible things to them. And what happened? The oppressors became the oppressed, and the oppressed became the oppressors, and it just goes over and over, and nothing really changes. The people change. You know, the poor people might become the rich people, and the rich people might become the poor people. That changes, but the system doesn't change. It perpetuates itself over and over. And so Jesus is saying, hey, there's got to be another way that we can do this. And here's what I'm telling you. Love your enemies, give to them, and I'm going to show you something else. He says, love your enemies, do good, lend to them, expect nothing in return. And look at this. Your reward will be great. Remember, we said that nobody can ever pay you back. Nobody can ever pay you back. Whatever somebody did, however they hurt you, they can't pay you back for that. But here's what Jesus is saying, is that if you do it my way, you are going to get paid back. It may not happen in this lifetime here, but look, he says your reward will be great. In other words, your reward from God, maybe in heaven, is going to be much greater than you could have ever imagined. And on this earth, it may not happen. But God is the one who's able to pay you back. And when you deal with your enemies on God's terms, then God is the one who can pay you back and make your reward great. And he also says this, and you will be sons of the Most High, for he is kind to the ungrateful and the evil. Be merciful, even as your Father is merciful. What Jesus is painting a picture of for these people, and what he's telling us today, is that God is kind. He's kind to the ungrateful and to the evil. You know, it doesn't matter who you are, what you've done. I mean, we're all sinners at one time, and God loved us even in our sins. And Jesus is saying, I want to teach you something about God. Like those people that oppress you, the people that you don't like, the people that hurt you, call you names, say rude things to you, God loves them, and God's kind to them. And therefore, I want you to be a representation of God to them. Because nothing's ever going to change if you do it the other way. If you love everybody who's nice to you, but you hate all the other people, if you're mean to your enemies, like, all they're going to see is like, yeah, that's the way that we do things around here. That's how we do it on earth. That's the way that it's always been. But he's saying if you love your enemies, you show them something different, then they're going to see a different picture. They're going to see a different picture of God. Instead of it being, I'll show you, you change the way, you change your inflection. Say, okay, I'll show you. I'll show you who God is. Yeah, slap me on the cheek. I'll give you the other cheek to slap. I'll create or I'll present a picture to you of what God is like. Because chances are, people who have abused you, hurt you in some way, whatever that may be, chances are they're never going to pick up their Bible. And they're never going to go, I wonder what God's like. I wonder what Luke has to say about what I'm doing. I wonder what Jesus did. I need to know the certainty of the things that Luke said. Nobody's ever going to say that. They're not going to pick up their Bible, more than likely. So where are they going to find out about who God is? From you and from me. Because they're never going to turn over to Luke 23, where Jesus has been tortured, and he's been hung on a cross, and he's hanging there, and he says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. They're not going to read that unless you take them there. And the way that you take them there is that you show them what God looks like to those who abuse you. And so when somebody cuts you down, you bless them instead. When somebody abuses you, you pray for them instead. When somebody hurts you, instead of saying, I'm going to hurt you, I'll show you, hey, I'll show you what God's like, because God lives in me and the Holy Spirit lives in me, and God's given me a different way of handling this situation. And so I know it's hard. Like, this was a hard sermon for me to write because there's some, it's natural to want to hurt somebody who's hurt me. It's natural for me to want to honk at the guy who cuts me off. And we all have situations in our own lives where we've all been hurt, and there's always people in our own lives that are always coming around, and they're always doing something to us, and we just don't like it. And it's a hard way to respond. And it's not always easy, but it's necessary. It's necessary that if we want to be a church, if we want to be a people that can show the world who God is, then we've got to be able to act like that as well. So here's what I'd like for you to ask you to do. This week, and actually right now, think of a person that you don't like very much. Think of a person that maybe you say snide remarks to whenever they say something back to you. Think of that person. One, pray for them. But two, come up with just a simple way that you can change how you respond to them. Because if you respond back the way that it's always done, nothing's going to change. But if you think, okay, maybe I can take them out for coffee or give them a little gift or something like that, that's going to change the relationship. And they may or may not reciprocate. They may or may not like it. But that's up to them to decide. We choose what we want to do. It's our choice to decide, how am I going to respond to this person? And so we can only go so far, then the rest of the choice is up to them. So we say, okay, I'm going to take you out for coffee. I'm going to say something nice to you, write you a kind email or something. Hey, just been thinking about you. Hope your life is going well, or whatever that may be. But we can say, okay, I've done my part, and I'll continue to do my part. And hopefully they will respond. But at the very least, at least they understand, okay, something's different about that person, because that's not the response I get from most other people. I'm seeing something different. And hopefully that will bring up some kind of curiosity. Well, why is he or why is she acting like that? Why are they being nice to me all of a sudden? And then all of a sudden it gives you an opportunity to share with them. Maybe. I'm not going to guarantee you that. But wouldn't it be awesome if when people look at Grace Church, they see all of us and they say, wow, they've got a really tight-knit group. They love each other, but they don't just keep that love just to themselves. Like when they go outside of church, like we see a difference out in the world. Like they don't treat everybody the same. Because if we only love ourselves, like what Jesus says, and then we go out in the world and we do everything just the way that everybody else does it, there's not going to be any difference. Nobody's going to see that. But when they say, wow, those people from Grace Church, they're different for some reason, because they love people who don't treat them well. And they say nice things to that person who's just said something really rude to them. Like, that's really different. And when we do that, all of a sudden we're changing the order, because it's not the oppressed or the oppressors becoming the oppressed and the oppressed becoming the oppressors. It's like, hey, we're changing that system. We're getting rid of that, because we are here to show the world who God is. And instead of saying, I'll show you, we just say, I'll show you. I'll show you who God is like. And so when we deal with our enemy on God's term, we will show them what and who God is like. And may we be that kind of people, and may our church be known for us showing the world the right way to deal with our enemies. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your word. Thank you that you call us to a different standard, to a different life, that you have saved us. And even when we were sinners, even when we didn't like you, Lord, you still loved us and you still cared for us, and you didn't destroy us or kill us or anything like that. Lord, you continued on with your grace in our lives. And I pray, Lord, that we would do the same to those who hurt us as well. Lord, that we would be a picture to them, that we would show them what it is like to know you and what you are like. So, Lord, as we think of those people that have hurt us in our lives, help us to find just a simple way to respond with kindness, a simple way to respond with love, to pray for them. And Lord, I pray that they would see the difference that you've made in our lives. And Lord, as we go out from here today, may we be known as a church that loves the world, that cares for them. And I pray that it makes a difference here in the city of Taipei and also on this island. And I pray as we go to other places in the world, the Philippines and Nepal, all throughout, Father, that we would be known as a church that's full of love, not just for each other, but for the world. Lord, draw us to you. Change us, because these are hard things. It's difficult. But through the power of your Spirit, I know, Lord, that we can move forward.